Is this thing on? Hey guys, this is Brian here. Just as there are prerequisites to recording a podcast, there are also prerequisites to prudence, and that's what we're going to talk about this week. But before we begin, I have to let you know that our giveaway for Mansfield's Book of Manly Men is now over, and we'll be announcing the winner next week. Thank you to everyone who participated, and if you'd like to get in on a future giveaway, stay tuned and we'll let you know when that's coming up. Until then, let's continue the discussion and focus on growing in prudence.
Hello, and welcome to the Vital Masculinity Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Sloyer, and I'm here with my co-host, Brian Murphy. How you doing today, man?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited again for another conversation on prudence, and tonight we're going to talk about the prerequisites of prudence, we're just so close to giving you real concrete resources. But I think tonight will be a good conversation because these are still things that you can implement to help put you in the right mindset to kind of practice prudence, to be a more prudent person. They're good foundations for prudence. But anyway, before we jump into that, I want to talk about just a quick couple of announcements. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. We would encourage you to particularly check out the episodes on virtue, on the 4 cardinal virtues, and then the previous couple on prudence. Those are probably better places to start. But anyway, we would love you to check out our website as well, vitalmasculinity.org. There you can find show notes, links to resources, and other tidbits that we think that you can really use to become a better, more complete man. If you want to have a conversation about this topic or what it means to be a man, you can join the conversation at our Facebook group, which if you go to Facebook and just search for Vital Masculinity, you can find it there. There's also a link on our website. And lastly, we would love if you leave a rating and review and be honest with us, obviously. And also, share this podcast and our website if it's something that proves valuable to you in your pursuit of becoming a better man. Brian and I don't profess that we're the best men out there, but we've been on this journey for so long, and we want to share what we have with you because we think you will find it valuable. And if you do too, we really hope that you appreciate it and that you spread this so that other men that may be struggling can kind of get uplifted as well and start down the path of becoming a better man. But anyway, tonight we're going to talk, as I mentioned, about the prerequisites for prudence. And the first one is the ability to be still. Brian, would you like to kind of touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think actually just first thought is you're probably wondering be still. We're talking about prudence and as you've probably heard several times, we're kind of harping on how prudence is being decisive and acting in a specific situation. But when you think about it a little bit more, the ability to be still is really a fundamental practice that we should take up that is going to help us to be able to respond in these situations. If you're always rushing from thing to thing, if you're not taking time to reflect on what's going on around you, you're not going to be able to adapt to what's going on. You look at people and they're walking down the street, staring at their cell phone, not even looking up what's going on. How are they going to prudently react to some mugger that comes along if they're looking at their phone? They're clearly not aware of what's going on.
Wow. Yeah. I hope that's not the example that you have to discover in your daily lives, dear listeners. But anyway, not to get too scriptural tonight. I love the quote still, be still and know that I am God from the Bible. And the reason, because I think this illustrates it very well, is that, we live very hectic lives right now. And in that passage, be still and know that I am God, it's equating stillness and really reflection with the knowledge of God. And in many ways, we can take that and look at our world, look at ourselves. Reflection is hard if you're constantly on your phone or you're constantly listening to music. Or, even for a good example related to us, you can't really reflect if you're just listening to podcast episode after podcast episode. If you're not actually taking the time to do the daily deeds, to really think about what we're saying, then it's not really going to produce benefit, because we're not here just to talk. We're not here for entertainment, and this is the reason why we do the daily deeds. We really want you to take the 2 minutes, the 5 minutes, the 10 minutes every day, in the coming weeks, and hopefully more than just the coming week, to really think about these things. And that takes putting away your phone. It takes quiet reflection. It takes being still.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's good that you bring that verse up too, because if you think about it, God also says that I am the truth. And when you think about prudence, we're trying to ascertain what the truth is to these situations so that we can respond, objectively to what's going on. And so if we're still, we're able to, take hold and grasp what is true about what's going on in the situation so that we can act in a true and good way to what's happening.
Right. So question for you, Brian. We live in a very mobile and just kind of hectic age. Why do you think people have such a problem being still?
Oh, boy.
That's not a good start.
Well, the reason I have that reaction is there's just so many reasons. I think a lot of it has to do with, and I guess I should preface this by saying, I'm a software engineer, so I work on computers all the time. So that's my job, and I make my money from that. But I think we look at the internet and these mass communications, television, music, the radio, all these different things where you have streams coming into your house, you have all these feeds, the social media feeds, you got everything's going on, you're distracted by millions of different things, and you don't even know what to pay attention to. And if you're and then we have this concept of fear of missing out. So you're afraid you're going to miss out on something, so you have to be hyper vigilant. And really, you're not really being vigilant at all, because you're just jumping from one thing to the next, and you're not taking the time to actually, soak in anything that's going on. It's just okay, I saw that. Okay, next thing. And if you're doing that, how can you deliberate about something? How can you truly make a sound judgment about a situation if you're constantly training your mind to just jump from one thing to the next without even taking the time to go really that deep into it?
I agree. I think that you touched on a lot of good points there, and I think I'll take it even one step further. And I think the reason why we've kind of really taken on this persona of just going from dopamine hit to dopamine hit, whether it's with our phones or music or the internet or Netflix or whatever it may be, is because we live in an age where we can afford to be, not still. And even more accurately, I think we can afford to be imprudent. If you think about past times, if you were an imprudent man, you probably would have been eaten by, saber-toothed tigers and things like that. Or, in maybe more medieval times, you would have been kicked out of the village, or at the very least shunned, because, we lived in an age back then, or people lived in an age, we didn't live, I'm not 1,000 years old, but people lived in an age back then where you had that sense of community. And this is another reason why we talk about vital masculinity. We talk about building community, and building strong and healthy community is important, because at the end of the day, we really depend on each other, whether we want to or not. And that really helps give us a good sense of our identity, what it means to be a man, and it helps us fulfill masculine roles so much better. But today's age, for starters, a lot of men can just live in their parents' basement playing video games until their 30s and 40s and 50s because their parents enable them. And also, you look at, and we talk about social welfare programs and the concept that, because we are alive, we have the right to a certain level of living, or a certain amount of money, or a certain, lifestyle. That's just honestly incorrect. Our ancestors would have found that so foreign, and in many ways it's because our brains, our bodies, our entire being is not really designed for that. We're not designed to just be able to do whatever we want without consequence, and that's an issue nowadays.
Yeah, I like the point that you bring up about the community, and if someone is a really imprudent person, they would send that person out. And I think another point you can kind of add to that too is that a lot of the times the reason they would do this is because someone who is extremely imprudent, like that could be a life or death situation for them or for their community, and not even just back then, like even today. Like imagine you go, say you go on a hiking trip or something like that, and perhaps you go on a solo hiking trip. You're all by yourself. You're out in the middle of nowhere. If you make some imprudent decisions, like, and no one's around to help you, that can turn out very badly quickly if you're not lucky. So even though it has more drastic consequences, back when we didn't have all this technology and safety and security that we have today, we still live in a very real world where there are very real consequences to what we're doing. And if you think about it, it comes back to maturity, where we're looking to be mature people. And even if we can kind of rely on these guidelines and guardrails to keep us safe. Like if we want to be mature men, we have to kind of go beyond that.
Right. The society that I think brings out the most in men and that men should strive to create is not the one of WALL-E, which is that Disney children's movie that came out about 15 years ago. But I always like to think about it because there's that image of like very large, rotund. Okay, I'll be honest, they're just fat. They're fat slobs, and they're riding around in these like floating segways. I don't know how else to describe it. And they're constantly on their screens, and in many ways that's so many of us. That's so many men that they have the ability to do that. We live in an age now where you can take a magic pill and lose weight. And we live in an age where, diseases that once would have killed you that are caused by just sheer stupidity or ignorance aren't. And I'm not saying that we should just let people die, but in so many ways, having this buffer for our own imprudence really means that our ability to be prudent withers away. Right.
So I think we're getting a little off tangent, but I think it was good. I like what
right. It's a good tangent.
So we're talking about prerequisites for prudence. So the ability to stay still. I think we kind of nailed that one down.
Yeah. So what's the second one, Brian?
Yeah. So the next one is experience that comes about through patiently dealing with real situations, not just things that you come up with in your head. Fantasies that you have, or maybe you visualized something, but actual experience in real situations where you're recognizing and kind of building this catalog of experiences in your repertoire, so to speak, where you can call back when you need to be prudent in the future.
Right. And this goes back to last week in the Misconceptions of Prudence Part 2, where, we like the idea when you're just starting off using training wheels, which is kind of the list, the resources of how to be more prudent. But again, it's not about just having a list always on hand that you can know exactly what you need to do, the if X then Y scenario. You really need to get out of your head and experience these opportunities to be prudent, to struggle in these opportunities to be prudent, which are concrete situations. And one of the things I liked in the definition you gave, Brian, is the concept of patience. And I'm sure we're going to talk about patience a lot more in the future. But patience is really a good part of prudence. One of the things that kind of strikes me nowadays is we live in the world of, Amazon Prime, the 2-day or maybe 1-day delivery now. I mean, heck, you have less than 24-hour delivery in many places for some services. And this really withers our ability to be patient and to practice patience, which, again, struggle is very important if you're trying to be virtuous. It doesn't come about in the mind, it comes about in concrete situations. But I think so many people are losing this ability because just kind of like the ability to be still is being withered away by all of these hectic distractions, and the ability, or the fact that we can afford not to be still. In the same way, so many people can afford not to be patient because we have we can immediately Google an answer. We can immediately order something that we need, and in 20 minutes it'll be there. I mean, Jimmy John's is a great example because I have to order Jimmy John's for a team tomorrow at work. And we'll order it, and 10 minutes later they'll be there.
Yeah. I think the point that you made about struggle is very key to prudence and to virtue in general. If we think about, we want to be prudent. That's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen. I want to be prudent. Oh, I'm prudent now. That's not how it works. It's something that we have to practice. We have to be patient with it. We have to do it this moment, and then the next moment, and the moment after that. And maybe we fail, and we got to get back up and do it again, and until we've formed the habit, and then we continue to maintain that habit. So it's not something. So don't get discouraged if you say, well, I'm not very prudent and I'm not sure how I'm going to get there, because like we said, you need training wheels. You need to take baby steps, and then you'll grow into maturity as you continue to practice it and get back up and continue to get at it.
Yeah, no, and here's a great example. If you're struggling with, kind of conceptualizing why you need to have this patience and this patient endurance, if you're struggling with that, go to the gym and ask the largest guy there what it was like when he was a skinny kid. Because everyone, the biggest guys in the world, your Arnold Schwarzeneggers, these people were skinny kids at some point. And this idea of kind of the patient endurance of struggle is when you're going to the gym and you're trying to become a bodybuilder. My father was a bodybuilder, so I have experience dealing with this. But, if you're thinking about like Arnold Schwarzenegger, that's a perfect example. They're not going 3 days a week. They're not going, and just going 45 minutes a day. These people were making it their lifestyle. They weren't having cheat days. They weren't making exceptions. And that's extreme in some ways because, you're, unless you want to be a bodybuilder, you don't need to be going to the gym 7 days a week, 2 or 3 times a day for 4 or 5 hours. And I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger was doing that, on top of like working at a construction job. So this guy's entire life was basically built around physical fitness. But when you're talking about virtue, there's no cheat days. If you're trying to be a virtuous man, it's not about being virtuous from Monday through Friday or just on the weekends. It's about in every situation, not making excuses, because men don't make excuses. You can't say, I'm not going to be prudent here because it's just too hard for me, or because my boss is a dick, or whatever it could be. You can't afford yourself to take cheat days or to make excuses in these situations. And you need to have that patience to really get from, the weak, scrawny kid to the next Arnold Schwarzenegger of virtue.
Right. It's like a muscle that you have to continue to work out, and if you don't, it's going to atrophy.
Right.
Let's move on to the next one. So we talked about, the ability to be still, the building up experience through patience, through struggle, and this third one, which is, I think, a little bit more involved, but essentially related to the first one in a certain way, is the attitude of silent contemplation of reality. So what exactly does that mean? So contemplation, it's like meditation. Looking at reality, trying to understand it, thinking about things. So it's very, I think, related to being still. Like you have to be still in order to contemplate. But in being still, that's kind of just like one part of it. In contemplation, you're actually grabbing onto something. You're grabbing onto what is the truth. So if we think about a lot of times when people think of meditation these days, they think of like Eastern meditation, Buddhist meditation, where it's like you're trying to, focus on your breath and basically forget about everything. That's not exactly what we're talking about here. Like, yes, you need to remove distractions and focus on what you're meditating on, but the focus is trying to grasp on to what is true, trying to understand, trying to grow in your understanding.
Interesting. So, as we've kind of talked about, you and me personally, Brian, there are 3 elements to this, right? And the first one is kind of this notion of true memories, or memories that, are true to reality. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So if we think about our memory, especially if you look at like I think of like different books that they have about psychology and about the brain, and probably things you've seen on TV and heard from different sources. Our memory can be very deceptive. They've shown through different studies that like people can actually like form memories about things that never even happened. And so the key here is if we want to have true memories, we have to be careful about how we deal with the world we live in, how we make mental notes of things, how we interact with the memories that we have. Just thinking, for example, like maybe something happens. Say you're out and you see a really cute girl and you want to go talk to her, and you go up to her and you stutter a few times, but maybe eventually it works out and you have a good conversation. Well, in your memory, you might be upset that you like kind of fumbled around in the beginning, and maybe you don't want to think about that. You want to forget about that. Well, that wouldn't really be true to what happened. You're kind of like whitewashing what truly happened to the situation and maybe forgetting about that in your memory. And so when maybe you think about it a week, a month, or even a year later, if that's something that you're able to remember, you might forget like a very important detail related to that. So that's kind of what we're talking about. We need to be careful with, and I think what it comes down to is really dedicating ourselves to being truthful in all circumstances. That's kind of how we are able to build this true memory. We can't decide that we're going to deceive other people, because ultimately we're probably going to end up deceiving ourselves as well as we remember how things have happened.
Right. Jordan Peterson in 12 Rules for Life, one of his rules is tell the truth or at least don't lie. And I think telling the truth is obviously the better part of that equation. But it's interesting because, as he writes about, like so many people, we lie to ourselves. And by doing that, we kind of shape and manipulate these memories that we have. And we can really make ourselves out to be, the saintliest of saints, or we can make ourselves out to be, these awful people. And I think in so many ways, this contributes either to, pride, or on the other end, anxiety, depression, and even the, potential suicidal, thoughts and things like that, because we lie to ourselves and we don't view reality as it is.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because it's not necessarily about just forgetting the bad things, but you could even be, completely dwelling on the bad things and only remembering those and forgetting the good things about the situations. So
right.
We have to be careful to be true to the situation and to the best of our ability remember what truly happened, and I think that comes back to being aware of what's going on and taking a step back and just assessing the situation, and that's how we'll be able to build these memories that are true memories.
Right. And I think that actually segues very well into our next element of the silent contemplation of reality that you mentioned, which is the fact that, we need to have an openness to truth, and we need to, in some senses, be open-minded in the right way. I mean, open-minded is it's a buzzword nowadays, let's be honest, but we can very often close ourselves off to the truth because we think we know everything, or we think that the way we see things, see the world, see a certain subject, whatever it may be, is the only way.
Right. Yeah, I think that's pretty key. If we're not open to what else is going around, if we're not open to the good things and the bad, if we're not open to different perspectives, then we're not going to really get a true sense of what's going on. So we have to make sure that we're open-minded. And if we think about it, being closed-minded, if we think we know it all, we're not going to see clearly. But in addition to that, we can't be so open to something that we just never settle on anything, because it's not just being open for the sake of being open to things, but it's being openness to what is true. So we have to kind of settle on what is true.
Right. Because openness nowadays is really much openness in the sense of fluidity, that whatever is kind of popular, whatever is democratically voted upon in the court of public opinion or in culture, even just in democratic, elections, like that is what we need to settle on. But 4 years later or 4 months later, it shifts, and that's the new truth. And truth is so much less arbitrary than the way that a lot of people make it out nowadays. And a lot of the ways that I think we can kind of, have this proper level of open-mindedness is really being mentored and seeking to be mentored by people that we identify are wiser than us. In a very specific context, this can be, learning from your boss or your manager, why they're so good at a particular task, or why they're so good with project management, or whatever the concept may be. Could be dealing with clients. There's so many things that you can learn from them because they're probably better than you. And yeah, you may think that they're a jerk, but if you still look at them truly, you can say, hey, this person has a skill or has a trait that I don't have. I can learn from them. And you have to first recognize that they may have that trait, because they may not. It's not that anyone that has a level of authority or that says they're a mentor or says they're a thought leader, whatever it is, that you automatically need to give credence to them and what they say. But you kind of need to, be prudent. You need to make the right decision and kind of be deliberate about who you choose to seek advice from.
Right. I think we definitely want to look for the more experienced people, because if we're talking about, the importance of experience, like, well, we're going to look for those people. At the same time, this open-mindedness can also apply to, new people. Like maybe someone's new on the job, or you make a new friend, or maybe someone isn't experienced as you, but maybe they are experienced in a certain way, or they have an idea that actually, shed some light on things that maybe you didn't think about. So that I think that's a key too. I think maybe
I love that example.
Yeah. I want to get to one of the main issues I think with open-mindedness is that, and we kind of touched on this already, is that we go too far. And I think if we think about, we talk about having true memories, looking things, trying to understand the objective truth, and someone might say, well, I'm just a human being. Like, I can't know everything about this situation from every perspective. And yeah, that's absolutely true. We're not asking you to be God, but just because you don't know everything doesn't mean you can't have true insights about things. So we need to be careful to, not take that realization. We should be humble about it, but we shouldn't say, well, because I can't know everything, that means I know nothing. Like that's
Right.
not very smart either.
That's how you get into relativism, is that a lot of people are like, it's too hard, or it's, quote unquote impossible, which is just a lie, all about reality. But it's impossible to, know everything. It's like, well, first of all, you're not saying know everything. You don't want to set up a false equivalency where you're saying that, seeking truth is knowing everything. But that doesn't mean that, okay, whatever anyone believes or feels or thinks is true then. There still is a very much an objective truth in the world, that the laws of nature, that, natural laws all bound in. So you kind of need to walk that line and not fall into relativism.
Right. So why don't we move on to the next one?
Sure.
The next one is what I'm describing as perceptive decisiveness. So it's the ability to act quickly and clear-sighted in unexpected situations. So if we
like
think
a
about
fighter pilot.
right, exactly. I mean, and if we think about this, like, this kind of is describing a very key element of what prudence is, but it's a prerequisite because if we're trying to understand the truth of things, we're trying to act quickly, we have to be in the habit of, like we said, being still, having, being true, forming memories that are true to reality. And then I think fundamentally when we talk about, so we're being perceptive, but we're also being decisive about the perceptions that we have. And I think this kind of comes down to confidence and then awareness.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, no, and I definitely agree with that as well. I think that's a really good way to describe it, perceptive decisiveness. And I think that, when you look at this, all of this stuff definitely comes from experience, which is kind of saying that the only way to get more prudent is to actually try to practice prudence. It's really to start running the race and know, first of all, that you are going to trip over every single hurdle in the beginning, and you may need training wheels. But eventually you will get to the point where you probably won't be, as long as you continue to do that, because you really will build up this confidence and this ability to act quickly. This kind of gets back to what we were talking about before, about the fact that you need to be patient. Realize you can't start off and immediately be the guy that's winning the golds, or at the very least the silvers or the bronzes, but the fact that it's going to take these experiences, these struggles, these just all of the experiences that are going to test you to actually begin to kind of gain this confidence and then gain the ability to be prudent.
Right. I think that's a good point, because if we think about confidence, it requires experience. But at the same time, if you are patient about things, if you're willing to struggle, I think you're going to be more confident, because you recognize, like, this is part of, I signed up for this. It's a struggle, and I know this is going to happen, so this is what I'm here for. And if you recognize, that's kind of like a key component of confidence. If you recognize, like, what you've signed up for, if you recognize, like, this is what I want to do, then you can move forward, even if you don't know exactly what's going to happen or what to expect. Because
Oh, go ahead, man.
yeah, because you're ready to do that, and that's what you're on the road to struggle, basically, to get that experience.
Right. Here's another final analogy for this topic, and we love analogies here, don't we? If you listen to so many dating coaches or people that talk about the concept of game, or really just trying to talk to women, because so many men nowadays, like, they don't know how to talk to women, they don't know how to approach women, they don't know how to get dates, and they don't say go read books and study. They don't say go think about and write up the perfect script. They say go out and talk to 5 women a day. Go approach the girl at the coffee shop. Just do it. And you may suck. You may say your name incorrectly. You may stumble. You may come off as a sweaty idiot. And yeah, you may be a sweaty idiot, but that's the only way you're going to get the ability to be confident. It's the only way you're going to get the practice, is actually if you go out and do it. And I think that really is a great analogy, because honestly, a lot of men that may be listening to this show may be having those questions. They may have listened to the same sources and are hearing the same things. Wouldn't you agree, Brian?
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about that too, you're trying to, if you go about it this way, you're not. Yeah, it would be great if you've met the girl of your dreams and you decide to get married, and that's great. But if you think about it, you're trying to build a habit. You're trying to grow as a man. And so what you're saying is, I'm going to go practice. And, part of practicing is messing up and failing. And that's okay. If you recognize that that's what you're signing up for, that I'm going to go out, and if I fail, that's fine. If I don't fail, that's great. But either way, I'm doing what I set out to do, and you can have confidence in that, even if you might not have the most confidence in wooing this girl.
Right. Cute coffee shop girl probably won't end up being your wife, but she'll help you find your wife. You just got to be patient. But yeah, so this episode, just to kind of recap everything, we've talked about the 3 prerequisites for prudence: the ability to be still, experience born through patience in concrete situations, and the attitude of silent contemplation of reality. And we'll put all of these in the show notes, as well as on our resources page on the library at our website, vitalmasculinity.org, because I'm sure, you'll probably want to revisit some of these, since these really do, I think, lay a groundwork for the ability to practice prudence and become more prudent men in your own lives. Or, in some situations, you may have just been staring at Brian and I's beard on our website. Since it is a nice website, and we do.
I hope we don't have one beard. I'm not sharing a beard with you.
Okay, that would be weird. We just to clarify, and we'll put it in the show notes. We do not share a beer. That'll be the asterisk at the end. Brian, any final thoughts? Oh, we gotta get to the daily deed. Don't want to forget that.
Yeah, the daily deed. So I think what we want to do here, so we have 3 things that we listed, but ultimately we want to grow on all these things. But I think the main thing, if we can start out with, is the ability to be still. So how exactly do you do that? It's pretty simple. You just don't do anything.
So, if only it were that simple.
So here's what I'm going to suggest. Think about something that is constantly distracting you. Maybe it's Facebook or Snapchat or your cell phone or whatever it might be. Just set that down. Let's say, I'm going to give you a hard one. Set that down for 10 minutes a day and just relax. Think about life. Maybe even try to think about what is objectively true about what's going on right now around you. And I think you'll find that if you do that and you make it a habit of, just taking a few minutes here and there to just, take stock of what's going on, you'll find that your life is probably going to have a lot more meaning because you're actually able to reflect on what's going on.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I think that's an amazing first step into becoming more prudent and starting to kind of build up that habit of prudence, because we don't want to be controlled by our phones. And just as a quick plug, if you, going off this subject, I highly recommend the book Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. That definitely helped to change and shape my attitude towards kind of technology in the way that it is designed to control us and to capture our attention. So if you're having trouble putting down your Instagrams or your Facebook or whatever the kids are using these days and really finding the time to be still, I recommend picking up the book, actually putting into practice what Cal says, and hopefully that can help you as much as it's helped me. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to this show. We ask that you please share it if you found it beneficial. Check out our website at vitalmasculinity.org for the show notes, for other resources that we mentioned in the show, and for kind of a recap in our library of all of these topics about how you can become a more prudent, how you can become a more virtuous and complete man. Thank you so much again. If you want to join the conversation, please check out our Facebook group. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I need to say to recap from the announcements from before, and I don't think there is.
Check out our website.
Thank you again. What was that?
Check out our website. It's all there.
There you go. It's all there. Yeah, guys, it's all there. I'll say thank you for a third time, and remember that virtue makes the man.